If you're putting money into a 401k, you might be saving tax today, but setting up a much bigger tax bill later, and most people don't realize this until they're already locked in.
Wait, so you're saying retirement plans can backfire?
I'm saying this, they work, but they also come with rules that can limit your flexibility at the exact moment you need it most. Everyone hears the same advice, just defer the tax now. Sounds simple, sounds smart, but almost nobody asks what happens when that tax comes back later.
Wait, isn't deferring tax always a good thing?
Not necessarily, because later doesn't mean better. Later might mean higher required withdrawals, higher total income, higher Social Security taxation, higher Medicare premiums, and most importantly, less control over when that income hits you. So yes, you saved tax today, but what you may have done is pushed that tax into the future, concentrated it into fewer years, and gave up control over timing.
So it's not just deferral, it's delayed tax on someone else's schedule?
Exactly, and that's the part most people never model, because on paper it looks like savings, but in reality, it can turn into a tax problem waiting for you later. So here's the real question. What if retirement planning is not about where you put your money, but how much control you keep over it?
Wait, what do you mean?
Most people assume retirement wealth has to sit inside a retirement account. 401k, IRA, locked, restricted, timed. But what if that's not the only way? What if you could still get upfront tax benefits, long-term growth, and future flexibility, but without giving up control over when and how you access your money?
So this isn't about avoiding retirement planning, it's about not defaulting to one structure?
Exactly, because the label retirement plan doesn't guarantee the best outcome. The structure does. Let me show you something most business owners never even realize is possible. What if instead of just paying for risk, your business could turn that risk into a tax strategy?
Wait, how do you turn risk into a tax strategy?
Some companies don't just buy insurance, they create their own insurance company. So instead of paying premiums to an outside carrier, they pay those premiums into a structure they control. Now, here's where it gets interesting. The operating business may get a tax deduction while the money moves into that captive structure for future use, protection, and growth.
So instead of money leaving the system, it stays inside a controlled structure?
Exactly, that's the idea. You're not eliminating risk, you're restructuring how that risk is funded. But let's be clear, this is not a retirement account replacement. This is a risk management structure that can create tax advantages when it's done correctly. Now, this is where a lot of people get this wrong, because once something sounds powerful, people assume it's simple. It's not. Captive insurance is not a shortcut strategy. It requires real business risk, real structure, real compliance, and the IRS knows exactly what to look for.
So this is not a watch one video and do it tonight situation?
Not even close. In fact, some of these arrangements are under increased IRS scrutiny. If it's not done correctly, you don't get the benefit, you get the problem. So yes, this is powerful, but only when the structure is real and the compliance is solid. Now let's shift gears, because this next strategy works very differently. This one is not about risk. It's about how income is taxed.
What do you mean?
Imagine this. You earn income at a high tax rate, then you legally restructure it. So when that same income comes back to you, it's taxed at a lower rate.
Same money, different tax treatment?
Exactly. That's the idea behind IC-DISC. A qualifying export business can pay a commission to a separate entity, and that income can be recharacterized from ordinary income to qualified dividend income. So instead of being taxed at full ordinary rates, part of that income may be taxed at a lower rate.
So this isn't deferral, this is changing how the income is taxed?
Exactly, and that's a very different type of strategy. Now here's where this gets really interesting, because the biggest tax advantages don't come from one rule, they come from how rules work together.
So this is where things start to combine?
Exactly. Let's take that IC-DISC idea one step further. What if the entity receiving that income is owned by something that doesn't pay tax on the upside?
Wait, like what?
Like a Roth structure. Now think about what's happening. The operating business gets a deduction, the IC-DISC receives favorable treatment, and the growth flows into a tax-advantaged environment. That's not a single strategy, that's structural planning.
So this is one of those things where the tax code allows it, but most people never connect the dots?
Exactly. Because the real leverage is not in the rule, it's in the combination. Most people learn rules. Advanced planning learns how to stack them. Now let me show you something almost everyone has heard of, but almost nobody uses correctly. The HSA.
Isn't that just a medical account?
That's how most people use it, and that's the mistake. Because if you use it strategically, this might be one of the most powerful tools in the entire tax code.
More powerful than a retirement account?
In certain situations, yes, because it gives you something very rare. A tax deduction going in, tax-free growth, and tax-free withdrawals. That's not deferral, that's triple tax advantage. But here's the key. Most people spend it as soon as they can. The strategic move is to let it grow.
So the beginner move is use it now. The smarter move is use it later?
Exactly, because in retirement, a huge portion of your costs won't be lifestyle. It'll be healthcare. So if you build a pool of tax-free dollars for that stage of life, you're solving one of the biggest retirement risks without using a retirement account at all. Now here's why this matters more than most people realize. Because retirement is not just about lifestyle, it's about expenses you can't avoid.
You mean healthcare?
Exactly. For many people, healthcare becomes one of the largest costs later in life. So if you can build a pool of tax-free dollars specifically for those expenses, you're not just saving tax. You're removing one of the biggest uncertainties in retirement.
So this isn't just a tax strategy, it's risk management?
Exactly, and that's why it's so powerful. Because the smartest planning doesn't just reduce tax, it reduces future pressure. Now there's another structure that builds on the same idea, but in a more formal way.
Something similar to the HSA?
Yes, but structured inside a retirement plan. It's called a 401(h). The idea is simple. Set aside money specifically for future medical costs, but inside a larger retirement framework. So instead of mixing everything together, you carve out a portion that can be used tax efficiently for healthcare later.
So this is less about general retirement money and more about targeted future spending?
Exactly, and that distinction is what makes it valuable. Because once you separate how money will be used, you can optimize how it's taxed. Now let's talk about something very different. What if instead of focusing on saving tax, you focused on controlling when tax happens?
You mean timing actually matters that much?
More than most people think, a C corporation gives you something many retirement plans don't. Control over timing. You can retain earnings. You can decide when distributions happen. So instead of being forced into a schedule, you create your own.
So this is not about paying zero tax.
No, it's about deciding when tax happens, and timing can completely change the outcome. Now take that idea one step further. What if you build a business, and when you exit, a large portion of your gain may not be taxed at all?
Wait, that's actually possible?
Under the right conditions, yes. That's what QSBS planning is designed to do. So this is no longer just about annual tax savings. This becomes exit strategy planning.
So retirement benefit here is not yearly, but one big moment?
Exactly. Because sometimes one well-structured exit outperforms years of small savings. Now let's zoom out for a second. None of these strategies are simple, and none of them are for everyone. Each one has rules, costs, complexity.
So the goal is not to use all of them?
Exactly. The goal is to understand that there isn't just one path. Because the biggest mistake is not choosing wrong. It's not knowing you had other options. So what is this really? This is not a warning story. This is not a mistake story. This is a clarity story.
Meaning?
Understanding how different structures work, so you can see how the same goal can lead to very different outcomes. So let's make this simple. Traditional retirement plans offer tax benefits, but they also come with restrictions, timing rules, limited control. Alternative structures don't replace them, but they expand what's possible.
So the real question is not which retirement plan.
Exactly. The real question is, what gives me the most control over my tax outcome long term? If you've been told retirement planning is just 401(k) and IRA, you're only seeing one piece of the system. Because the real advantage is not just saving tax, it's understanding how the system works. Follow Ivy Smart Tax. We break down what most people never get explained.
Because once you understand the structure,
You stop following default paths and start making intentional decisions.